What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album and major label debut by rock band Green Day. Basically, this project is called Dookie, and it came out in the winter of 1994. Now, the thing about this particular album, around this time, basically Nirvana and folks like that, Grunge, Soundgarden, folks like that, Alice in Chains were really dominating the radio. So there was a lot of grunge music and just that sort of sound that was kind of dominating back in the early 90s as far as that kind of went. Kurt Cobain was still alive when this particular album, Dookie, came out in February of 94. So it's kind of the concept. This was kind of like a page. Dookie was kind of a page turner for rock music and overall 90s music in general, especially after Kurt Cobain's death in April 1994. So I would have to say this is some big stuff that kind of happened here. This sound really started to shift things throughout. This album really started to shift things throughout 1994 and 1995, and there's just like a lot of lazy kind of summer appeal about this particular album that just kicks a lot of ass and does a lot of things right. It was just interesting kind of have this concept just because it was kind of unsung at the time. Just the particular stuff that kind of went along with it was just a different pitch as to how that kind of happened. This really kind of brought punk music into the forefront a little bit more, kind of slacker rock and stuff like that. This is kind of like a more stoner rock type album, which it doesn't full blown wholesomely embrace like stoner rock as far as that kind of happens, but it's just kind of the concept that it seemed likely that you probably were smoking if you were listening to this album back around this time as far as that kind of went. It's just a good lazy kind of affair. This album Dookie just has some real lazy kind of summer affair as far as that kind of happens, especially good for slackers throughout the 90s as far as that kind of went. When you pair this up with movies like Dumb and Dumber and Jim Carrey movies from the 90s and stuff like that, just some real good affairs and appeals as far as that kind of happen. I'd say another band that kind of pairs up with some of that would be Weezer. They were kind of similar to this, at least I think they were throughout the 90s as far as that kind of went, the mid 90s. That's just some good stuff. So Billy Joe Armstrong and the band really had some good groundbreaking stuff that they did around this time. Definitely a good pitch as far as that kind of went. It just makes me curious if Nirvana had lasted longer throughout 1994, if this album would have done as much damage. I'm kind of curious because this kind of felt like a page turner, but I just would have wondered what would have happened if Nirvana would have been able to promote like In Utero a little bit further as far as that kind of went, whether or not Foo Fighters would have happened, just stuff like that that kind of went around this time. It's just an interesting concept as far as that kind of went. It would have been interesting to see Nirvana and Green Day kind of go neck and neck, not like they were rivals or anything, but just the concept of supposing how that could have went if there could have been two sounds, if grunge would have lasted longer as far as that kind of happens. But it's just some good stuff as far as that kind of goes. Definitely some revolutionary type stuff here, like the concept of it. Like I was saying, it's a real good and excellent. This is just great for some hazy kind of simmering summer music as far as that kind of goes. Had a ton of singles, just really worked for the time. This album went diamond, so it sold over 10 million copies. It's one of the better selling albums of all time as far as that kind of happens. Rolling Stone put this in one of their 500 greatest albums of all time. So it's just some good stuff. Definitely kind of a seminal 90s album, to say that again. Definitely kind of the concept of it. Just a groundbreaking album that did a lot of damage. Now, the heraldment about this project is probably larger than the score I'm going to give it. It's not like I'm going to give it a real low score, but it's just kind of the concept. I'm not going to give it a 10, but it's not going to get like beneath a 7, I would have to say. So you'll see what I give it, but it's just kind of the concept of it. But I do overwhelmingly kind of like this project, I'd have to say. It's just some good stuff here. So we'll go ahead and talk about the 4 singles. Now, the first song is pretty distinct on here. This is Longview, and this one definitely is kind of like a lazy, kind of sunny summer day, I would have to say. This is a good toka bit bop. I would definitely kind of feel like it's just a carefree, kind of out in the wind blaze. Longview is just kind of a carefree, out in the wind kind of blaze of a song, I'd have to say. And it's just an overall pretty distinct Green Day song. This is a song I've heard in recent times on the radio. It's just one that continues to be a highlighted hit from Green Day as far as that kind of goes. It's just a good, nice one that just continues to have a lot of energy and just overall appeal. Between this one and like American Idiot and some of those ones off the American Idiot album, I definitely say this is definitely some distinct Green Day that just has a lot of affability and just overall marketability as far as that kind of goes. Just an easy kind of highlight and definitely a pretty groundbreaking song as far as that kind of went. This continues to be like a staple of 90s rock as far as that kind of goes, so that's a nice one. Basket Case is the second single, and this is definitely kind of a bustling summer heat of a song, I'd have to say. This is kind of like some errands and pace of day comer, so I would definitely feel like, and it's just great for June and July, I'd have to say. So this is some good stuff. So Basket Case is some good stuff here. Just overall like the concept of it as far as that kind of have. It's just a real nice one to kind of have. This one's a little bit more, Basket Case is a little bit more apt and out and about and just kind of a little bit more of like a bustling overall time and just a little bit more traverse in mind. But it's definitely good for like some errands and just pace it overall feel. So I like the concept of Basket Case not being quite as lazy as Longview, but they're both pretty good ones for just summer heat as far as I can have. So, but both these singles are pretty good for summer heat as far as I can have. So these are just some good concepts as far as I can goes. Welcome to Paradise is the third first single, and this is definitely another nice one. This is like some good surf and kind of blazing heat music, I'd have to say. It's just a jovial kind of day commerce that this song kind of has, and it's just jovial kind of day commerce through the city as far as that kind of goes, I would have to say. It's some good stuff to kind of have, just not quite as much of a traverse. This one's not quite as much of a traverse. This one's not quite as errands and as bustling as Basket Case, but I would have to say it's in the same commerce type feel, just in a more kind of relaxed kind of sense. Maybe tasks are kind of done, just getting ready to kick back, go buy some beers and stuff like that. Just go play some football at the park, something like that, frisbee, some of those type things as far as that kind of goes. Just an easy kind of kickback as far as that kind of goes. Definitely like, and it definitely reminds me of something you'd listen to out in California, Florida, just places like that near oceans and those sorts of things. And Welcome to Paradise is definitely something I feel like you'd listen to closer to oceans, kind of places like California and Florida, places like that, some of those type places, Texas, some of those type places, places like Texas, Florida, some of those type places during the summer as far as that kind of goes. Just some nice bops as far as that kind of happens. And then When I Come Around is the fourth single. And then When I Come Around is the fourth single. This is a vintage Green Day hit, I'd have to say. It's peppy but lazy summer haze, definitely. And this is just kind of an atypical ladies hit, I'd have to say. So I definitely like this one. This is just a nice kind of highlight of Green Day as far as that kind of happens. This is another one. A lot of these singles, I feel like a lot of these singles from this album hit #1 on the rock chart. So a lot of these were pretty much like I almost want to say that Green Day might have gotten like 3 or 4 #1s from the chartability on like the rock charts as far as that kind of happens with these particular singles. This was a big deal back in 1994 and 95. This lasted a good while throughout the mid 90s as far as that kind of went. They did drop Insomniac in 1995, but this album had a lot of lastability and sold a lot. So there's just a lot of good songs on here. When I Come Around is another one that I've heard on rock radio in recent times as far as that kind of happens. Just a good standard kind of bop to kind of have on like a basic day as far as that kind of happens. It's peppy, but it is just like some lazy summer haze. This one's kind of in a lazy. When I Come Around is another lazy hit similar to Longview as far as that kind of happens, but both of these are like some summery type hits that just have a lot of appeal as far as that kind of happens. Definitely like these ones. These just When I Come Around and Longview are songs I continue to hear on rock radio even today. So these are definitely some vanilla type hits that are just easy for 90s fare as far as that kind of happens, and just continue to be staples throughout. And these songs just continue to be staples throughout today's times, I'd have to say. So these are definitely some nice ones, I'd have to say. So the rest of the album, so when it comes to the rest of the album, there's 14 songs in this particular album, and out of those 14, I wound up recommending to you 9. So those 9 songs would be Longview, Basket Case, Welcome to Paradise, When I Come Around, Burnout, Chump, Pulling Teeth, She, and Having a Blast. And there's also a 15th song that's tacked on to FOD, and I'd have to say I don't recommend that one either, but we're just going to kind of talk about some of these. So talk about the songs I don't recommend real quick, which is just basically all in the second half of the album. Basically Sassafras, Roots, Coming Clean, Amenia, Sleepus, In the End, and FOD. All of these are kind of more just kind of tacky type songs that just don't have a real lot amount of. These songs I don't recommend on here just have a lot of tackiness and just don't overall have a lot of edge to really compel them and push them over the edge. A lot of these are just like a minute and a half type songs that just don't really do a lot of damage. They just kind of feel tacked on and don't really have like an extreme sense of anything with, just don't really feel like they have a lot of juice and stuff like that. They just kind of feel like extra songs or demos or something like that that just didn't really have the pungency of the singles. These songs just really felt like extras that just didn't really have that compellingness that was probably necessary about it. So that's just kind of the thing. But I would have to say, basically, the rest of these songs on here, this is pretty much like a state-of-the-art album. I'd have to say the first 9 or so songs, the first 8 or so, basically the first 10 songs you hear minus Sassafras, Roots are pretty all top-notch and kick-ass as far as that kind of happens. This is a pretty sheer album as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of the concept about it, definitely pretty noteworthy and state-of-the-art. The fact that they got to 4 singles on their first album is pretty. The fact that they got to 4 singles on their major label debut really says something, I'd have to say. So it's kind of the concept about it, but we'll go ahead and talk about some of these album cuts so you'll see what I'm talking about. So Burnout's a pretty good one. Burnout's definitely a pretty good one. This is like a punk music boiler, I'd have to say. It's a good regular day fare, definitely. It's just an easy loose. This is just an easy cut loose kind of kickback song with like some carefree fun about it. So there's just some good ones at the beginning of this album. I feel like Burnout, Having a Blast, and Chump are all kind of some summery type ones to kind of have either at like a house party or a night venue, something like that, or just kind of cruising around. Just some good affable kind of sense that just really is like substandard punk music at this particular point, but all of these are pretty rowdy and just great to hear one stepping out or something like that. All these album cuts I'm going to recommend to you just have a lot of jive about them. They're just some real nice ones to kind of have for this like great kind of night venue sense, just circa 1994, 1996 as far as I kind of have. So Burnout's a definite nice one. Like the hook on there also. Chump is a pretty good one. This is like an affable kind of house party and residential kind of mid-pace fun of a song, I'd have to say. Definitely like this one. It's just a good pairing with Paradise, or this is just a good pairing with Welcome to Paradise. I feel like some of this kind of blazing heat type music that just really has like the rowdiness on there, and it's just good for like some carefree type feels. It's just good for some carefree type commerce as far as that kind of happens. These are just some real nice ones to kind of have. So Chump is pretty similar to Welcome to Paradise. I'd have to say just a good, nice one to kind of have in that same sort of sense. But these are also like some good kickback kind of ones. They're just some hangout songs, but they're also kind of commerce and just out and about kind of feels as far as it kind of happens, whether it's just in your car or something like that. That's a nice one. But Pulling Teeth is a good one. This is kind of similar to American Idiot. This one, Pulling Teeth, gives me similar vibes to American Idiot from 2004. Some of that malaise of that particular album. This one's basically like a late day kind of wind down makeshift, I would say. This Pulling Teeth is just like some late day kind of wind down makeshift, I'd have to say. It's like an hour or so after When I Come Around in terms of when I would play it, something like that. And the song just simmers. This is just another good summary highlight to kind of have it like 4, 5:30. This is another good summary highlight to kind of have it like 5:30, 6:30 p.m. when the sun is setting, stuff like that. This is definitely one when I was talking about When I Come Around. If When I Come Around is kind of a little bit of day after hours, like 2:30, 3:30 p.m., something like that. Just got done with work or class, something like that. I'd say Pulling Teeth is like an hour or so after that particular song. If you're listening to both those, this would be a good pitch to kind of have. Just kind of look after just kind of some wind down music. There's not a ton of kind of makeshift type songs, but it's not really a bad thing. But it's just kind of the concept that there is some makeshift on here. It's just kind of in a more wind down sense, which is good to have. Just kind of similar to Third Eye Blind. There's a couple songs on here similar to Third Eye Blind kind of vibes, just for some of that simmering kind of sunset type makeshift as far as I'm gonna have. So that's some good stuff. And then She is a nice one. She is definitely a nice one on here. This is similar to She is like a similar Summer Haze to Longview, I'd have to say. It feels like a single. This song definitely does. I like the concept of it. It's definitely a song that feels like it could be a radio single, and I might have actually heard it on the radio airwaves. I'm not really sure. It's kind of similar to like AC/DC and folks like that, like Metallica, who get singles that are played that are not singles on rock radio as far as that kind of happens. This might have been one that's gotten airplay. It's just a popular song, I'd have to say. And the second half of the song has more bustle about it, kind of similar to Basket Case, and it's just an overall good bop. I definitely like this one as far as that kind of happens. Really like the pitch of it. It's similar to Longview at the beginning of the song, similar to Basket Case at the end of the song, I'd have to say. So it's a good kind of pitch to kind of have some of that just overall good summer haze. It's just a good pitch to kind of have some of that summer haze as far as that kind of goes. So I definitely like that one. And then Having a Blast is a real nice song on here, I'd have to say. This is a good loud venue boiler, I'd have to say. It's similar to Burnout, definitely. The lyrics are not as jivey, I'd have to say. It's kind of a serious song in somewhat of a sense, but the song rivets pretty well, I'd have to say. So it's just a nice one. Definitely has like the instrumentation of this song is pretty lively, I'd have to say. Most of the first half of the album is pretty lively as far as that kind of happens. These are all just very lively and riveting kind of night venue songs, and just summer haze as far as that kind of happens just for stepping out. These are all just kind of night venue type songs to kind of have in like a summery sense and just an overall pitch. The instrumentation is very lively, and this overall works as like some good kind of thrills as far as that kind of happens. Just a good concept to have some of these that just work in a real excitable kind of sense and just overall engaging and exhilarating, I have to say. So that's some good stuff. That's basically the album as far as that kind of happens. So me basically recommending 9 songs out of 14 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.25 out of 10. I kind of feel like the concept of it, I mean, 9 out of 14 is a little bit more than half, but there are a few songs on the kind of minus end of things as far as that kind of happens, I just would have to say. But for the most part, this is a very engaging album. I just would have to say the first half of this album, the first 10 songs minus one song on there, is just like pretty sheer. The energy is just up. The first 10 songs that you hear minus one song is just overall pretty sheer. It's just energetic. It has some liveliness. It's compelling. It's hooky. It's stuff like that. It just has like a lot of bustle and just overall makeshift type feels at work, and just have a highlighted sense of just stepping out and having some social kind of times, and just overall kinetic and electric type energy that just works. There's some overall good stuff to kind of have there, but it's just kind of the songs toward the end where I just felt like they ran out of energy a little bit. But considering that this was like their major label debut, that's not as bad, just because they were still kind of maybe melding a little bit towards getting towards that. But for the most part, they did extremely well. And I'd have to say the social score, I'm going to go ahead and give like a 9.5 out of 10. I'd say for the most part, if there wouldn't have been 5 songs that I didn't recommend, I'd probably say that the social score would get a 10, because this is pretty affable. Like a lot of these songs you can still hear on standard rock, like a lot of these singles you can still hear on standard rock radio even today, and there might even be a couple album cuts that you might have heard as far as that kind of one. This is a popular album. This continues to do highlights, and this is basically one of Green Day's most notable, apart from American Idiot, as far as that kind of happens. This is definitely, and I think in like a standard, I think in terms of like a journalist critic type standpoint, I would definitely say that this is like a 5-star type album as far as that kind of happens. So it's definitely some highlighted type stuff. This had a lot of social appeal, and it's pretty much this had a lot of social appeal, and it's just overall pretty much like a state-of-the-art kind of album for the 90s as far as that kind of went. It was revolutionary, was a page turn, and just did a lot of things right, and this overall kicked ass as far as that kind of happened. So 9.5. In terms of the future, like Green Day is getting ready to drop an album this month, January 2024. So we'll see what kind of happens with that. I'm going to have to get to some more of these Green Day albums, particularly like Insomniac and their 1997 album, some of those type ones. But this is definitely a pretty above average record here, I'd have to say, and I do recommend it quite a bit.